What is the sweet spot of a lens, and do you know the sweet spot of your favourite lens? Well, in short, the sweet spot of any lens is that aperture that gives the lens its sharpest image with the least amount of distortion. Usually the sweet spot of a lens is somewhere between f4 and f8, and as I said, that's where the lens is at its sharpest and its least distortion. When we're talking about distortion, we're talking about purple fringing. But when you go to the extremes of an aperture, so f1.2 or f32, then you're at least f32, then you're introducing diffraction, and that starts to soften the image. And that's why your sweet spot is usually measured 1 or 2 stops above its widest aperture. That's kind of where we are. And how do we know what the sweet spot of our favourite lens is? Well, I'll tell you what I do. I go on to the most credible looking website and I look up the table for my lens and the aperture range, and on that website it'll tell me that the sweet spot is going to be f2 or f4 or f8 or f6 or whatever that number is, and I just take it. I just take that as real. I just take that as credible information that I use, and I often say on my videos I'm using f4 because it's the sweet spot of my lens. But I don't really know that. That's just what someone else has told me based on their tests. And I think that's rather interesting because I just take their word for it. So what I'm going to do in this video, I'm going to test my lenses. I'm going to test one of my lenses and just prove to my own self what the sweet spot of my favourite lens is, or one of my favourite lenses. That's what I'm going to try to do. As I said, I'm going to try to give it a try and test it myself, and I'm going to test it on my 25mm f1.8. And as you know, if you've watched any of my videos, you'll know that I've got 3 lenses, which is a bit odd really when you consider most photography YouTubers has probably got millions of lenses and they select whatever the lens they want, blah, blah, blah. But as you know, if you've watched any of my videos, I've got 3. I've got the 17mm f1.8, I've got the 25mm f1.8, and I've got the 45mm. Technically, I've got 5 lenses because I've only recently bought the 40-150 f2.8, and I've also got a 12-40 f2.8, which is broken. But anyway, besides all that, I'm going to test it on the 25mm, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to find a composition that I can use that's got something that I can measure, something that's got maybe a bit of writing on it, it's got some contrast, so we can have a good look at the image. And I'm going to take a series of shots with this 25mm lens, and I'm going to go through all the aperture ranges, and then when I've done all that, I'm going to go home and we're going to have a look at them together and see try to determine what is the best the sweet spot, what's the best aperture for this particular lens. What I can tell from the website says the best aperture for this lens could be anywhere between f2 and f4, because I use micro four thirds, the sensor's smaller, the lenses are smaller, and maybe that's why the sweet spot isn't anywhere above f4, like it might be on full frame or APS-C, it might be f4 or above. So that's what I've been told. That'd be really interesting to find out if the sweet spot is f2, if it's f2.8, f4, whatever that's going to be, because that'll be a really interesting test. And if you're like me and you use these f1.8 lenses, or you have a micro four thirds camera, you might be interested to find out what that sweet spot is. So I'm going to find a composition, take the shots, and then we'll go home. So here's my image. I've got this sign just in the middle. It's going to give me some text to be able to test it with. I've got this wall here to give me some texture, different colours to give me some contrast. I'll start with f1.8. It gives me about 1/500th of a second, and I've got a 2 base ISO, and I've got 2 sync timers. So I'll take this shot now, and then I will cycle through all the other apertures right up to 22, and then what I'll do is I'll pick another. I'll do the same thing with the other 2 lenses, but this is the one I'm testing properly. So I'll just do that, and then we'll see you back home when I've done them all. And here's my final one, f22, and that's them all done. I'm back home now, and I think I might have made a little bit of a mistake, or I've possibly bitten off more than I can chew. because when I got home and had a look at those pictures that I've just taken of the sign, they were random. The images weren't what I was expecting, and I might have made a couple of mistakes. And it might have been because I was outside and there was clouds and the sky and the sun, and I got different lights. I got quite different readings. So what I decided to do, because I come home, I decided I could do this at home, and I control the light, I can control everything. What I decided to do is take a picture of this model's Spitfire aeroplane, which I got given as a present. I haven't made it up yet, but I'm going to, and I might even do it as a time lapse and make this model. So I positioned this and took some pictures of that with all my lenses. And I thought, well, while I was at it, while I was here, while I had the lenses all out and ready, I would also, why don't I do the 40-150, my nice new lens, and just see what that comes out like as well. So I did all that, and I've had a look at the images, and my mind still boggles. I'll say now, I think this is probably something that needs to be done in a proper lab, and where everything's completely controlled, because I don't think it's an easy thing to do. But I jump on my computer and I'll show you exactly what I mean. You can kind of see what I'm trying to get at, because it wasn't as simple as I thought it was going to be. Let's have a look. So here's two images on the screen. The one on the left is f2.8 and the one on the right is f11. So just looking at these pictures, just look at these pictures, and I think if you didn't know what aperture was used in these shots, you wouldn't be able to tell which is which. The one on the right, the f11, is slightly more saturated. It's got a slightly color tint on it. That's the only thing I can see that's different between these two images. So I'm going to zoom in. So I'm going to zoom into 214%, which is nuts. I shouldn't do this, I know. And you could look at those two images. You'd really have to look hard to tell the difference. I think, as I said, this is the f11's got a slight color cast. You can see detail, that little scratch on the A there, exactly the same. All the details are the same, and I think they look identical. And that was part of my problem. One of the things, I couldn't tell them apart. So so that was it. So then what I then did, I had a look at the two pictures of the model, and on the left I've got f2.8, and on the right I've got f11. Now on this one, and this is where it got interesting, I can see immediately with my eyes, with my myopia, that 172 and that supermarine is less sharp than that. So that tells me that that f11 for this image, f11 sharper, which I kind of didn't quite. You could argue, yeah, that it could be sharper, but that's right in the middle of the image. That's right in the middle. It's not out in the outskirts or where you might see a much sharper. So what could that be? That could be me just camera shake or something other than just, and something else. So that's part of the reason why I found this really hard to do. So what I then did, I decided to ask AI to write me a program that would actually do this automatically. So I wasn't relying on my own eyesight. So what I did, I got onto Copilot, and I asked Copilot to write a program, a Python script that I can run, that would then have a look at these images and compare them. So apparently there's this program called Laplacian, which what that does, it measures each pixel against the next one and determines how sharp it is, or what the difference between the two pixels are, and it will give you a score for each image, and it will tell you what the score is. And you can ask it to do anything, but what I asked for is it to give me a score for the center of the picture, the top left and the bottom right, so I can then get the program to do the comparison. It would then tell me 100%. So I did this once, and I got some really odd results of the pictures of the model. Then I decided to do 3 sets of each aperture, so that I could maybe average it out a little bit, and it still didn't seem perfect. And I'll show you the results. And then finally I decided to go for it, and I got it to do 10 shots for each aperture, for each of only the 3 lenses. So this is I'll show you the spreadsheet that I came up with. So this is my spreadsheet. So I've got on this spreadsheet, I've got the 17mm, 25mm, 45. I've got the 40-150 at 40mm and the 40-150 at 150mm. So what I did 10 shots, and that's what these are color coded into each aperture. This is f1.8, 2, etc. And then I summed up all these numbers, the center of the picture, the top left and the bottom right, and that gave me a figure. And then I averaged these 10, and that gave me a figure. So what I was attempting to do was take out any variation from camera shake or all sorts of, just my poor photography, and I wanted it to give me a number, and that's what it did. So as you can see, all the way down to f22. So then what that did, that gave me this graph, and what it says is that anywhere between f2.8, f4 or f5.6 is a really good aperture to use for that lens. f4 just shades it. Now this bottom graph, this was the graph from when I did 3 lenses only, and it's pretty much for the 17mm, it's pretty much the same, although this gives f2.8 and 4 more prominence, where this gives f4 and f5.6. Well, these are in the middle. So if you're going to use that lens, you want the sharpest point, you go for f4 or 2.8 or 5.6. That's fine. 25mm was quite a bit different, and this is the lens that made me want to do 10, because I saw this was when I did 3 shots, and that f2.8 just didn't look right. I thought that can't be right. So when I did it again using 10 shots, it gave me a much better f2.8 score, and it gave me a very good f4 score. So it said f4 on this lens is the sweet spot, f2.8 isn't far behind, and it starts trailing off quite significantly from f5.6 down. So that's 25mm. So once again, any of these earlier, these lower apertures, you're going to get a really nice sharp shot. And I'd even say 5.6 and f2 are still fine as well. So that's the 25. Now let's have a look at the 45mm, and this was nuts. This was definitely nuts. So when I did the 10 shots, it came right up to f5.6. That's where it thinks it's a sweet spot based on all these different shots, and averaged them all out. So I can't argue with that. But the nuts thing was this f22. Why it got f20, that big number on f22, I don't know. That's really odd, because when I did the 3 shots only, I got it did go up on f22, but not as startling as that. That's just nuts and crazy. But once again, I'm going to sort of stick my neck out and say that you f4, f5.6 on the 45mm, and potentially f2.8 is going to be your best apertures. And you know what, you probably knew that already, and I knew that already because I was using those apertures already. So then what I did, just to finish this off, I didn't do quite as much detail as these ones. I did the 3 shots for each aperture from 2.8, so it only goes up to f2.8, and this is what it gave me. It says f8 was the best aperture at 40mm for the 40 to 150, but equally f4, f5.6 and f8 are all on the same ballpark. And then it drops off the cliff at f11. So f11 or higher, they're not usable. And that lens, you probably wouldn't want to use f11 anyway. And then the 150 is a similar result, but this f16 is a bit of an anomaly as well. And that's why I thought it was the right thing to do 10 rather than 3, because it'd iron out these anomalies. But once again, f5.6 and f8, much the same as the 40mm, is the right aperture for the 40 to 150. So yeah, as you can see, my challenge I had trying to do it outside, it was difficult. What I also found is that the JPEGs will give you a much varied reading, because they've been processed and lots of the data has been taken out. So that's why I went for RAW. Just by the way, this, I'm rambling on a bit now, but this Python program, if you want to use this and do this yourself and try it yourself, all you do is copy this into a file ending .py, put it into the directory where you want to test your files. They have to be raw files, and then you just run it, and it asks you for the directory. Put the directory in where it asks for it, and it'll just then check all your images and calculate and give you a spreadsheet at the end. That's how I did it. This is, like I said, this is set. I did this for raw files. I think it's any raw. ORF, look. So if you're using a Canon or a Nikon or any other brand Fuji, Sony, they might have a different ending. So you might want to change that. But what you can do, exactly as I did, go onto AI, pop this in AI and ask it to change it for whatever camera you have, and it'll do it for you. Yeah, so there you are. There's my findings. That as I said, it's just too hard, really. It was too. I couldn't tell a difference. And like I said, the moral of the story is that you pretty much use any aperture, and I think you don't really need to use aperture for sharpness. What you want to use aperture for is to change the depth of field of your image. So whether you want as much as your image in acceptable focus, use a smaller aperture, or if you want a blurred background, use a wide aperture. That's what you would use that for. Or you might want to use a small aperture for starburst, or for slowing down the motion, or a wide aperture for if you want to do any wildlife or sport. But I would suggest that you wouldn't necessarily use your aperture as a tool for making your image as sharp as possible, because let's face it, we don't always want our images as sharp as possible, because we want them to look a bit more natural. They're my findings, which is I know it's not really what I was expecting. Thank you very much indeed for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed this video and my test of the sweet spot of a lens, or to try to find what the sweet spot on my lenses were, has been even a little bit interesting, even if it was a bit of a challenge for me. If you have enjoyed this video and you do like my content, why don't you give it a like? That'd be awesome. And if you haven't subscribed, go on, hit the subscribe button. It's free, it's easy, and it means a massive amount to me. Thank you very much indeed for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheerio.